All right, this is Lab 11, Cardiovascular System. It starts on page 119. Things you can cross off. You can cross off parietal pericardium and visceral pericardium. We will instead call the outside surface of the heart or outside layer the epicardium. You can also cross out under the left and right atria. You can cross out the fossa ovalis. And then for the coronary blood vessels, they are cardiac veins, not coronary veins, cardiac veins. And you also will definitely need to be able to define systolic and diastolic blood pressures. All right, the heart. Here's a lovely cartoon of the heart. The heart is found in three cavities. It's found in the thoracic cavity, but as I'm sure you remember from Unit 1, you can break that down into smaller cavities, including the pericardial cavity and the mediastinum. Pericardial cavity, just where the heart is, the mediastinum, the space between the lungs. So the heart is found in three cavities: thoracic cavity, pericardial cavity, and mediastinum. The heart has four chambers: right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. On the surface of the heart, you'd be able to see this little wrinkly flap. This is part of the right atrium. It's called the auricle. So this is the right auricle of the right atrium. And the left atrium has one as well. So this would be the left auricle of the left atrium. The point of the heart is called the apex. Open up the heart again. This is again a frontal section. This wall here is the interventricular septum. It's the wall between the right and left ventricles, interventricular, between the ventricles. We have a lot of blood vessels carrying blood to and from the heart. Bringing blood to the heart, we have the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. They're carrying blood to the right atrium. Blood then goes into the right ventricle and then leaves through the pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk and artery then carries blood to the lungs to get oxygenated. Then the oxygenated blood gets carried through the pulmonary veins, right or left, into the left atrium, goes down to the left ventricle, and then gets sent out the aorta, which is also an artery, to get sent all throughout the body. Then the oxygenated blood goes to the tissues, becomes deoxygenated, and comes back, surprise, surprise, by the inferior and superior vena cava back into the right atrium. What does it mean when the blue vessel is blue? It turns out that means the blood is deoxygenated. The color blue for vessels means it's deoxygenated. Color red means it's oxygenated. That means you can be an artery or a vein and be either color. All right, there are valves found in the heart, four of them to be specific. There's a valve between the right atrium and right ventricle called the tricuspid valve. There's a valve between the left atrium and left ventricle called the bicuspid valve. These valves are also known as atrioventricular valves because they're between the atrium and the ventricle. Then we have the pulmonary valve in the right ventricle and the aortic valve, you can just barely see it, in the left ventricle. These valves are known as semilunar valves because they're between the ventricle and a blood vessel. So pulmonary valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk, aortic valve between the left ventricle and aorta. The pulmonary valves, the semilunar valves, have three little pockets that hang off the sides of the heart. They're found between the border of the heart and the artery, and when blood backs up, it fills these pockets, preventing it from getting into the ventricles. The atrioventricular valves, on the other hand, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves, they have these little cusps or flaps that are connected by these little string-like structures called chordae tendineae to muscles on the walls of the ventricle called papillary muscles. The tricuspid valve has three cusps or flaps. The bicuspid valve has two cusps or flaps. Again, they're connected by chordae tendineae to the papillary muscles. They, when they close, prevent blood from going from the ventricle to the atrium. We do not want backflow to happen. The heart has three layers to its wall. The innermost layer is the endocardium, lining the inside of the chambers. The middle layer, the thickest layer, is the myocardium. The myocardium is made up of cardiac muscle tissue. Myocardium is where the muscle tissue is. And then the superficial layer, the outer layer, is the epicardium. Epicardium, a thin layer, although in some places it gets thicker where there is adipose tissue, fatty tissue on the heart. So again, here's a question. Papillary muscles are found in the atria and the ventricles attached to chordae tendineae, both 1 and 3 or 2 and 3. The answer is both 2 and 3. They are in the ventricles. So here the chordae tendineae are. They are in the ventricles and they attach. Here's the papillary muscles. They are in the ventricles, papillary muscles, part of the ventricles, and they attach to the chordae tendineae. Systemic and pulmonary circulation. Systemic circulation is carrying blood throughout the entire body. Pulmonary circulation is carrying it to the lungs, so carrying deoxygenated blood to the lungs to get oxygenated and returned to the heart. There's also coronary circulation. These are blood vessels carrying blood to the heart itself. The heart is a living organ. It needs oxygen to survive. So coronary arteries branch directly off the aorta. They are the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. They carry blood to the heart. Then we have a collection of cardiac veins, the great cardiac vein, the small cardiac vein, and in the back, the middle cardiac vein. We're going to refer to those three collectively as the cardiac veins. All the cardiac veins carry blood from the heart back to the coronary sinus. So the coronary sinus is the main vein of the heart's coronary circulation that carries blood to the right atrium. So coronary sinus is a vein. It empties into the right atrium. Blood pressure, the force that is exerted against the vessel walls, against the blood vessel walls. It's measured normally at the brachial artery of the arm, right at the crook of the arm. Systolic pressure is the amount of pressure the blood has when the ventricles are in systole, so when the ventricles are contracting, forcing blood out. That's the high pressure. Diastolic pressure is the blood pressure when the ventricles are at rest, or ventricular diastole. So that is a lower number, a lower amount of blood pressure. Normally, a good max value for a young adult is 120/80. Anything below that to a point is fine. Above that may or may not be an issue. Pulse pressure is important to measure the stress on the blood vessels, on the arteries. We do not want the arteries to get too stressed because then they may rupture. So here is the heart contracting. The atria contract, boom, and then the ventricles contract, boom. Signaled by an electric current that starts as the sinoatrial node and then spreads throughout the heart. This is a showing of the current in the heart as it travels through the heart. So atrial systole, ventricular systole, boom, blood goes out. It's a cool scene. All right, hypertension is when your blood pressure is too high. So if your resting blood pressure when you're just relaxing is 140 at the top or 90 at the bottom, so 140 systolic and or 90 diastolic, then you have hypertension. This needs to be happening a lot. Just having your blood pressure higher for a single instance doesn't mean anything, but if this is a constant, then it is a problem because it'll destroy small blood vessels called arterioles, can lead damage to lots of parts of the body, damage to the kidneys, lose kidney function, damage to the heart, have a heart attack, damage to the blood vessels in the retina of the eye, leading to blindness. When large arteries rupture, that's called an aneurysm. Sorry, that's a lie. When large arteries become stretched and can't return to their normal shape, that is an aneurysm. Aneurysms can lead to rupturing of those arteries, which could cause a heart attack or stroke or death. So basically, if you have hypertension, you really need to get medical attention. All right, so the numbers on blood pressures. Two numbers, a high one and a low one. High one's on top, low one's on the bottom. High one is systolic blood pressure. This is when your ventricles are contracting, so the blood being forced out leads to high blood pressure. The lower number is when your ventricles are relaxed, blood pressure is lower. So that is what determines your blood pressure. Systolic when the ventricles contract, diastolic when the ventricles are relaxed. As blood travels further and further away from the heart, from the blood pressure goes down, so it's lower in arteries further away, continues to get lower in capillaries, and then it gets really low in veins and finally returns to the heart. The blood pressure gets lower as you go further from the initial vessels coming directly off the ventricles. Remember those. All right, this is how to use an old school blood pressure cuff. We don't actually get to do this, which is too bad, but just so you know the process, this process will not be on any quizzes or anything, but just so that you're aware of it. Put the cuff on the upper bare arm. Make sure you cover the brachial artery at the crook of the elbow. Person needs to be relaxed and their arm level. You palpate to make sure you are in the right place, that you can hear the pulse at the brachial artery using a stethoscope. Kind of cool. Then you close up the valve, squeeze the bulb. It'll tighten on the person's arm when it reaches something like that. Then you have squeezed enough. Open the valve slowly. As the cuff deflates, you listen through the stethoscope. When you first hear the sound of the pulse again, that is the systolic pressure. Don't forget it, remember it. Then continue to slowly deflate the cuff, and when you no longer can hear the pulse, that's the diastolic pressure. And it takes practice to get good at this. Some of you probably have plenty of experience, others of you, something to look forward to in the future. All right, that's it for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it.